How do you sell anything when the coronavirus has devastated the economy all over the world? Hi, this is Takatoshi Shibayama, host of the Future Design Podcast. I run a blockchain solutions company, but I'm always looking for new technologies and ideas to improve our lives. In this episode, I have Joe Escobedo. Some of you might know him from his Cup of Joe series on LinkedIn, or the book he co-authored with a previous guest of mine called Asia Growth Stories. He's going to tell us how brands can re-examine themselves in a post-COVID world, and how to give value to their customers, and how to sell effectively. So stick around to the end. We've been in this quarantine for about 2.5 months now, and I think the rest of the world has slowly started to move out of the quarantine. In Singapore as well, we're going to be in phase two, which means that we can go out and socialize with other people from tomorrow. But I think during this time, I think the world has changed quite a lot, and people talk about pre and post COVID. I think what changed was the market's perception on companies and how they view the world and how they come together and how they want to project their image to the world. I feel like it has changed, and especially with the Black Lives Matter movement that's going on in the U.S. as well. The image that people want to project. Whether they want to put that black screen and show, that they're in solidarity with all the people. I think the corporate messages have seemed like it has started to change. So what do you find that has changed in your world and what you see at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of brands, and I was speaking to someone about this just yesterday, is a lot of brands have kind of jumped onto the COVID-19 bandwagon. Whether or not they had anything interesting or valuable to add to the conversation, they realized, look, everyone's talking about it, it's trending. So as a brand, we must talk about it. Now, I'm always of the opinion that if you don't have anything valuable to say, just don't bother saying it. Because once again, just adding to the sea of everything that's happening is not adding any value. It's not cutting through to your specific customer. So, for example, if you are in the telecommunication space and you actually have some tips for remote working or using telecommuting tools, perfectly, I think it makes sense. If you're something completely random and has no correlation to COVID-19, you're just trying to jump into the conversation. I always try to think of it as like a networking party, and you're always that person. It's like, hey, can I join the party too? Like it's just awkward when you don't have anything interesting or valuable to add to the conversation. So for those brands, I would say, does this make sense for your brand? And also the second thing, which you talked about, is consistency. This is a huge thing in branding and communications, is that if you're not consistent in your message, you can see brands doing this. They have a spike when it's Pride Week, or they have a spike when Black Lives Matters, and then they go back to business as usual. So there's no consistency in terms of the values, in terms of the things they believe in. So that is another big pet peeve of mine from a brand perspective, is just jumping on the bandwagon without it actually tying into your own beliefs, your company's mission, and what you portray on a consistent basis.
Right. And I think a lot of it has to be, is it really genuine, or is it and it's about, really everybody's looking at you and say, what is your identity as a brand, right? And if you're flip-flopping all the time because there's some social events happening in the world and you want to jump on a bandwagon and then completely change your view 360, oh, sorry, 180, and talk about, completely something different. I mean, I feel like the people who are really loyal to brand can walk away from it. So in this kind of post-COVID world, how do you find your brand identity then?
So I think your brand identity shouldn't change. I think that's a big misconception, is that there should be a drastic change. I always hear this, this new normal. For me, the way you deal with your customers shouldn't differ. So people talk about, oh, we should be more empathetic now. Honestly, you should have been more empathetic before the the whole disaster pandemic hit. It's not one of those things that just because your business is hurting that you can be more empathetic to your customers. It should be something that holds true throughout every department, every line of business you have. So I think once again, a lot of people see this new normal as like you have to do the things you should be doing. In my case, you should have been doing them anyway. You should have been empathetic. You should have been consistent in your message. You should have been providing value. You shouldn't just inundate your customers or your database now with emails because look, you have more time. Business is slowed down. Um, And there's been a lot of backlash about that as well. We've run sessions and say, I've never gotten this many messages saying brands care about us. Um, and it's one of those things. It's like if they cared about you before, then it makes perfect sense. Going back to your point about being genuine, I think if it's always been the case, like, look, we care about you, then that's perfectly fine. If it's when your business, your bottom line is taking a hit, and now you're talking about, you know, let's be empathetic, and now we care about you, there's going to be a massive backlash. So I think it goes back to what I was saying in terms of consistency, as you were saying, being genuine in what you're talking about. Otherwise, people are smart, that they're going to know when you're flip flopping and things like that, and then it's going to have a negative impact on your brand perception.
But what about those brands that actually find out that, oh, we weren't actually really loyal to our customers, or weren't providing a lot of values to our customers? Can they actually make this pivot right now, or do you think that they should just go on being the uncaring brand towards their customers?
So that's a good question. I mean, honestly, it's never too late to start. I think this is the perfect opportunity that the economy has slowed down. People are not buying in a lot of different countries. So now is the time to be that trusted partner, lack of better words, because it'll pay dividends later on. Now that shouldn't be your only objective. Is help as much as I can now, and then when things get better, I stop helping. That shouldn't be the case. But now is the perfect opportunity to start because, look, businesses have slowed down. There is an opportunity. There's an extra downtime that you could be doing, whether it's giving back to your community, whether it's hosting educational sessions like this. There's no better time in at least my generations to really slow down, think about your customer, put yourself in their shoes, and think about how you can add value, just like you're doing here.
And is there a way to re-identify your, unique selling point, or some kind of, retargeting, the audience that you want to reach out to? Because, it is a good point in your business life cycle, because you had this pandemic, because there's a lot of social issues that are going around in this world, that you can sit down and think about, how can I really recreate our values, or our mission statement in this time, so that you can evolve into the changing world, or changing environment that we're in. How can organizations sit down with all their staff, from research all the way to marketing, and think about how this company can be something different from now on?
So that's a very good question, and I was just talking about this yesterday. It's really about striking a balance between messaging. So a lot of the times, the mission or vision is developed internally. So it's either by the founders, the CEO, or the senior leadership team. That usually helps guide the entire organization. Now, the biggest challenge I see is that most organizations just focus on that, and either they get very fuzzy and they forget about that internally. So it's not reiterated on a regular basis. I think the best brands, I think LinkedIn is a beautiful example of this. Everyone in the organization knows exactly what the mission is. If you ask them. Now, I can't see the case in most organizations. The first is that kind of reminder that is very important from the external point of view. What is the public's perception? Because it's one of those things where you say that you are this, but the customer or your partners are saying something completely different, then there's a huge misalignment. So it really goes back to finding that balance of what do we truly believe as a mission and as a company, and are we actually conveying that? Are we actually living that? That's step one. If you're not doing that, then obviously your customers, your partners are going to have a different perspective about you. So I'm always a big believer in doing research, even Googling your company, doing things like social listening to identify what are some of the things that they're saying about your company. Does it match what you describe yourself, or is it completely misaligned? If so, how do you bridge that gap? I think that's something that not a lot of organizations focus on, but I think it's extremely important when you want to come up with a very, very clear positioning statement.
Have you in the past, whether it doesn't have to be during this COVID time or post COVID time, even, have you seen any companies in the past that actually, sat down with their staff and realigned their vision, or pivoted from their mission, so that they can actually, be a different company?
Yeah, I mean, I've done sessions with clients to do this. I think where they really get lost is they have this very nice overarching mission, but they don't know how to actually implement it. So we talk about building things like a messaging house. We have your overarching vision, your mission, and then you have your different content pillars. So the big challenge I see is too many brands want to talk about so many different things that you don't really know what they stand for. So really narrowing it down to ideally no more than five. If you can do three, I think that's great. Pillars of topics that you want to communicate on a regular basis, and then going one layer deeper. So below the communication pillars is your proof points. What are things that are unique to your organization, whether it's your resources, whether it's your geographic scope, whether it's something that makes you unique, your IP, whatever it is. I think people need that tangible things because missions and visions are great. I think it should be the guiding path for most organizations and employees. But to make it tangible for the executional level staff, as well as the people you're selling to, they need those additional proof points or those examples to really bring it to life. So that's something I focus on a lot with clients as well.
And a lot of times, some companies are very visible to the consumer's eyes, but there are B2B companies out there as well as that is not visible to the end users. So on a B2B company, how can they actually do it differently compared to B2C companies?
So another good question. I think it's important to remember whether you're in B2B or B2C, at the end of the day, you are selling to another person. That is one of the biggest things that I always hear B2B companies saying, we're selling to X and Y, Z company. It's like, no, you're selling to Bob or Jane, who's in marketing or in accounting or in finance. That's who you're really selling to. You may be selling to her counterparts as well, part of a larger buying committee, but you're selling to them. You just happen to work for XYZ brand. So really getting down in terms of a granular level and understanding the person you're selling to. It's important to understand, if you look at this from an inverted triangle, you're looking at, the industry, understanding that. Great, you should be doing that. Then the company, what are some of the things they're being challenged with? And then below that, which most people don't focus on, is the individual. So really understanding who is the decision maker, who is the influencer, who is the internal champion, all different people who help make the decision within a B2B organization. You need to be appealing to them. You need to understand what is their own personal motives. What are the things that drive them? What's going to get them promoted? Because I think without understanding that, if you're just trying to sell to a company, you're going to come up with a very generic blanketed statement for everyone. It's not going to have much impact for the people you're actually selling to.
I want to take a specific example. I can take my business as well. Sometimes I do get people who reach out to me and ask me, I'm thinking about this kind of business requirement for my, solution. Can you help me with this? So not necessarily those people are the decision makers. Maybe they want to look good to the bosses that they came up with this certain solutions that they can help their businesses. So on these interactions that we have with these people who are closer in contact with ourselves, how do we actually identify what they want, maybe what they want is not really what they need as well. I mean, how do we understand the actual fundamental reason why we need to sell to that business?
So that's a very good question. I think this comes through, the initial calls and meetings with them. I think the first couple sessions should just be what we call discovery. So really understanding their business, their role, and depending on your relationship with them, asking things like, how do you get measured for success? What are some of the KPIs that you hold internally? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you're selling to, whether you're selling to an intern, you're selling to a CEO, there are two main things that drive them. The first one is what's going to get me promoted. And the second is what's going to potentially get me fired. So that literally drives 99.9% of people's buying behavior is, look, how do I get promotion? What are some of the things you're going to do to help me catapult my career? They may not say that, but that's what it's leading to. You look at a project, that's going to help you with your own kind of internal case. And also, there's the flip side, there's internal inherent risk. So for example, if I invest with you or your products or services, is it going to go wrong and am I going to get trouble? Am I going to get fired? That's another thing in the back of their mind that they will never tell you, but it's important to understand at a basic fundamental psychological level, these are important drivers. So understanding that first is extremely important, and then really understanding the questions. So once again, what does success look like to you? I'm a big believer in the reason I see a lot of projects and partnerships fail is they don't have a clear end goal in mind. It doesn't be specific KPIs, but it needs to be at least where we want to go. And it may be you may have a very different perception from what they have, and it's usually when there's a misalignment between the two is when you see projects go bad, you see partnerships go bad. And it's not necessarily that either party was wrong or right, it's just that neither party really aligned on what is it we want to do. And once you have that kind of end goal or that vision in mind, it's easy for both to work backwards. I think as someone providing a service or a product, it's important to lay out what are those steps we're going to take. So, for example, if we relate it to the fitness space, my goal could be I want to get six-pack abs in 6 months. Okay, great. What are some of the things we need to work backwards and get there? We may need to go to the gym, 4 or 5 times a week. We may need to eat this and that and that. I think you can't recommend that regimen unless you understand what is it that you actually want to achieve. So those are things that I've seen gone wrong, and I think once you have it right, that really helps build longer term successful partnerships.
Yeah, I've seen, we always do when we discuss with customers, we talk about what is it exactly that you want in the end? What is the final product that you want to see? What kind of problems are you actually trying to solve? And a lot of times when they come up to us, they don't really know. They just think they pick and choose like things that they saw on the internet or whatever and say, oh, can you use this or can you use that, and can you build something that kind of looks pretty sexy because I'm using all this cool emerging technologies. But in the end, actually, you don't need any of that, and it could be a very simple solution as well. So, I think the dialogue with the customers is probably one of the most important things from my experience. But in the end, a lot of times I feel like even if I get that, even we have that kind of close connection with the customers, I feel like sometimes they wither away. And I don't know what it is. Sometimes it could be like the price point that they didn't really understand or they didn't like, or is it the solutions that we come up with is not really something that they really want to elevate to their bosses. So, getting it down to the nitty gritty of like really what that person wants and also what the company actually needs sometimes might have a misalignment. So, maybe that's a little tough question, but what do you think is a good solution when you're having these conversations with your potential customer?
So that's a good question. I think where it goes back to what I was saying, really understanding each layer of that kind of decision-making process. First, understanding the industry. Is it, for example, right now impacted by COVID-19? So that'll impact the way you communicate at a higher level. With that, before you even get to the person, is that company, how are they doing? Are they going through a recession? Are they, on the upturn and they're doing extremely well? What are some of the markets they're trying to get into? What are some of the audiences they're trying to get to? So I think understanding each of those at a higher level is extremely important. And then trying to bridge the gap. I think, so to answer your question, yes, there is potentially misalignment between what the person wants and what the company wants. Um, and ideally, you should try to align that as much as possible based on your knowledge. But honestly, people are inherently selfish. We want what's best for us. We want what's best for our family. So it's often easier to understand that person and sell to them, or that buying community and sell to them, than the company. Now, hopefully they're acting in the company's best interest, but a lot of the times it's much easier to sell to them. And I think another good point you brought up is in terms of um, reservations, so things they may push back on. You brought up price, and I think price is one of those things that I learned the hard way early in my career, is that when you're competing on price, you almost always lose, which means that people use that as a smoke screen to say, look, you're too expensive. When honestly, the real reason most of the time is I don't see the perceived value, or the value does not exceed the cost for me. So I'm not going to gain as much as I'm going to lose in terms of financials. So that's why I always recommend, just like you're doing these educational series, educating them as much as possible so they can see the value before they even reach out to you. So your likelihood of converting them, the sales cycle is going to go up incredibly higher if they know about you before, this is something I talk about in the book, is building that trust even before they meet you, before they reach out to you. If they say, I love your podcast, or I saw you on this and that, there's a higher propensity to buy versus someone who's just searching for, podcast support or whatever services that you offer, and then reaching out to you. The latter are going to be very price sensitive. They're going to say, you know what, I'm looking at a couple different vendors or a couple different options, and you're more expensive than so and so, so I'm going to go with this guy or this gal. Whereas people who know you, who trust you, are much more likely to invest in a higher price because for them it's not a risk. For them, they've already seen you in action, they've seen the value, and at that point, it's just okay. It may need some additional massaging to get the deal through, but at the end, it's not going to be as much of an uphill battle as it would when you're trying to sell to someone who has really never heard of you. They've just done a quick Google search and they found you. So there's a big difference between both type of people you're dealing with, and it's important to understand the two.
And you've been in this region a lot, and you wrote co-authored the book Asian Growth Stories. So do you find that there's a different way to negotiate with customers in the Western world versus Asia? And in Asia could be, many different countries, so everybody has a different cultural background and preference. But do you see that in Asia you could do something quite differently?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I mean, I've lived in Germany. I was raised in the U.S. and I've lived in China and Singapore. And the big difference, I think, between the West and the East is the importance of relationships. I didn't really fully comprehend the importance of relationships until I got to China. For there, it's a make or break thing. If you don't have a relationship with them, you're not going to get the deal done. No matter how good of a negotiator you are, um, it's not going to go through. So that applying that concept of relationships, even in Singapore, there's this whole thing of I have to meet you. Obviously not the case now, but before COVID, I have to meet you in person before I can do a deal. Whereas in the US, you could easily jump on a call and close the deal. That's not going to work in Asia. They may need to see you multiple times. They may need to introduce you to their bosses, maybe face to face. Now, that's changed to virtual sessions like this, but there still has to be some kind of interaction, ideally in person for them, or something where it's at least a video call. They're not going to sell many things if you have the video off and you're trying to sell that way. It just doesn't help facilitate the relationship. Goes back to what I was saying in the book. They're not going to trust you, and they need that reassurance that you are someone that they can work with on a longer term basis. And it goes back to the relationship you're building. Whereas I think in the States or in the West, it's not as important as I would say in Asia.
Yeah. And right now, you touched upon trust. So, in Asia, you have to have face to face. And I run, again, run into these problems all the time. I wouldn't call it a problem. It's creating trust. But, I do have to travel quite a lot because my clients are in Thailand or in Laos or in different countries. And they always want to have that kind of face to face that build that trust. But now that we are completely in these isolated we can't travel internationally. And trust is very hard to build, even with these Zoom calls, because it is still quite impersonal. So, do you have any tips on like being a better Zoom caller for sales or projecting your image out to clients?
So yeah, I think two things. I'll address the first one, then I'll take a step back. The first question is how do you become a better salesperson? I think honestly, it takes a lot of time to become comfortable speaking on camera. I remember when I just started training, when I started doing sales meetings, I found it very uncomfortable. Um, and so because of that, I was awkward and my energy was low. And that's not the way I am in person. It's not the way I sell or the way I train. So I have to amp up my energy levels that much more, my enthusiasm that much more, because I know it doesn't have the same impact that I would if I was, with you right now. So I think just being cognizant that you have to dial things up when you are, doing video calls, just so that that enthusiasm or that feeling they're going to get is going to drop because it's video. So if you already started from here, then you're going to be dropping down to here. Whereas you dial it up and you take it from here, then you're going to get down to here because of the mode. So I think energy for me is extremely important and something I didn't really understand effectively until I started doing more of these online sessions. But going back to your question, I think trust should be something that's built way before I get on a sales call with you. And I'll give you an example. Cash is another person we know in common. I've never spoken with Cash before. I've reached out to Cash recently, and he was like, "Oh, I've seen a lot of your videos. I found them extremely inspirational and helpful, and so on and so on." And I was like, "Okay, that's amazing." Like I said, we've never spoken, we've never even direct messaged each other before a couple months ago, and through the content, he built a relationship. We built a relationship, or he built trust. So there's many people, whether I'm trying to recruit or whether I'm trying to find partners, that content that you develop can play a massive role in the trust you develop with a potential client without you even knowing it. I think the advantage of social media is you have the reach that we never did before, and we can reach people that we've never met, probably in faraway lands, but because they see you on a regular basis, become more familiar with you, then they feel like there's some kind of connection or bond. So by the time they get on a call with you, they feel like they already know you. And I just was on a call with a gentleman about 15 minutes ago who I had never met before, but he's been following me for the past couple of years on LinkedIn. We got on a call and it was like two buddies talking to each other. We never met each other, never even jumped on a call, but it was like, we just hit it off. We were just chatting and just talking about business and so on. And honestly, if he had never seen me or vice versa, and I reached out to him and I said, "Hey, let's jump on a Zoom call," it's going to be awkward. It's going to be like a first date. I'm going to be looking around like what to say. He's going to be thinking about what to say. It's going to be super awkward. But because I already get a sense of who he is, what he believes in, his expertise, I can jump right in. So I think that, once again, is the advantage of content that not a lot of people think about, particularly from a sales perspective, is just making the conversation so much easier. And people open up that way once they feel like they know you. If they don't, then they're very apprehensive. That wall goes up as a salesperson. And you know what? You're going to face a lot of uphill battles when you do that.
Yeah, I actually feel the same way as well because I've watched, your, videos on LinkedIn and, now, I was able to put a face to an author of a book and then, watching you and engaging with your guests and talking about certain things, then now I have an idea of like what you're going to talk about, your personality. So now that we're on this call together, it's much easier to talk to you because I already feel like I know you, right? I mean, I think that's the same with a lot of video content that are out there because it's hard to show, well, especially for me because I'm not a professional celebrity or anything like that. So it's not like I have an image that I want to project, right? I'm just kind of being me on video. So, this is what you see is like what you get. So if you see me on a phone call or video call like this, I mean, this is what you're gonna get. So, and this
Yeah.
is speaking style that I have as well. So I think it's really important to have that video content out there. But I think a lot of people are not that comfortable with video content or creating video content, right? I mean, it takes a special amount of effort to actually even try to do these things. So, is there other ways that social media can be used for people like a little bit shy to be on video? And there might be more comfortable on a writing style or a different type of style. I mean, is there any other ways that you can project your image out on social media so that you can create a brand image?
That's a very good point. So I'm going to take it from someone who doesn't have celebrity looks like you do. I unfortunately am working with this. So I started out as a writer for many, many years. And I always recommend people, yeah, don't jump into the deep end when you're getting on social. Like I've been doing this I've been on social for at least 10 years. And so I only doing video about baby steps and before you jump in. So for example, if you've never, you just started a LinkedIn profile, you started getting active on social media, and you're even nervous about creating your own post, you can go in and comment and provide insightful questions or comments on other people's posts, I think that's a great way to kickstart the conversation. So once again, I try to tie it back to this networking mentality that most people are already familiar with. So you go to a networking event, it's very difficult to show up and say, "Hey guys, hi everyone, I'm gonna start talking and everyone come to me." But it's much easier as an introvert like I do to kind of slide your way into the conversation, and then say something smart, and people are like, "Ah, okay, tell me more about your thoughts on this." So really taking that same kind of approach in, asking questions, commenting on other people's content, just becoming more comfortable. And then you can see based on the reaction what works, what doesn't work. And then from there you can start, just posting short form content, less than 140 characters, for example. And then as you dial it up, you do it more consistently, you could branch out to longer form content. So let's say you're doing a 500 to 1,000 word article, as an example. And then you might dial it up and you might say, I'm gonna do a podcast. Look, I'm not familiar, I'm not comfortable with video yet, but at least I can record myself. Then I can transcribe that, or I can have that audio clip. And then once I do video, what's next? So this is something that I'm trying to get to, is what's that next step? So for me, it's creating a series like you've done here. I call it A Cup of Joe. So it's a series of interviews with business leaders, marketing and sales, to really understand what are some of the common challenges they're having and sharing practical tips with the audience. Another thing that I do, which is kind of that on the further side, I've already kind of jumped deep in, is doing like weekly or monthly sessions, which are completely live, just like you run them, no script. We have 3 topics we can talk about, and it's rapid fire. Either I'm sharing my ideas or I'm getting insights from the others. That takes a lot of, people always say, how do you do that? Because it takes a tremendous amount of pressure. But once you get to that point, everything else becomes so much easier. Once again, caveat is I did not jump into that. It's taken me a year just to create video content. It's taken me, 9 years to create written content before I was comfortable enough doing it. And I'll quickly share my story in terms of how I created video content. I was terrified. I remember when LinkedIn created, launched video, and I saw other people getting traction, and I was like, oh, gosh, but I was too nervous to do it. So one night, I think I published something on my phone, and I was like, okay, everyone's gonna be asleep. I'm just gonna publish it. Doesn't matter. No one's gonna see it. And so I woke up the next morning and I was overwhelmed with the positive response that I got. And I was like, whoa, I had never gotten anything like that on any of my written stuff. So it just helped reassure me that what I'm doing is right. I became a bit more comfortable. You can watch my initial interviews, still super awkward. I still am, and I probably always will be. It's my personality. But I think just taking that first step is always the hardest. Once you do that, things become progressively easier. And as someone told me recently, the worst thing, you can do if you don't like it, just delete it, remove it. Like it's not the end of the world. But I think just taking that small leap of faith, thinking the baby steps for your own journey is going to be extremely important.
Yeah, I like the way you actually started your way of like commenting on other people, and then you're moving your way up into creating videos. Because I'm also an introvert. I hate big parties. I hate going to other people and just do, hey, I'm Takatoshi. I do this and this, and what do you think about this? It's very hard for me to do that. It's better if I go straight into a specific topic, so that I'm in my comfort zone, that I can talk about whatever I want to. But for me, like creating these podcasts, I went from like no existence in LinkedIn to this. So it was a huge jump for me. But I think obviously I could scale it back too and say, okay, let me try to like comment on other people's posts, and then kind of work backwards and to see like if I could do like a more holistic style of doing things. But I think most people can take your advice, not mine, because your style is much more on a very progressive level that people can actually try it out for themselves. And I think it's a huge encouragement for a lot of people who are wanting to network with people. Social media is so much easier than actually talking to a person, because you can say something stupid, or you always feel like you think you're going to say something stupid, and as you said, you could delete it anyway if there's no comments, or so there's no judgment straight into your face, right? So I
Yeah.
think that it's much easier to start networking with comments here and there, and then build your way up. And so, I think social media has definitely allowed us to be able to, reach out to so many different people in different ways, and try to make it personal as well, which I really like. And now that, we'll talk about social media as one tool, but is there other ways that we can start, trying to get customers now? Because we can't really fly. We can't actually have big gatherings now. So, other than social medias, do you have any other avenues that we can get clients?
So yeah, that's a good question. I think if you look at the different channels, social media is a good way to start the conversation. I always try to take it to a more personal level. So whether it is doing one-on-one 50-minute consultations with people on my network, I've been doing quite a lot of that, probably more than I've ever done before. Is a way to meet people to find out more about their challenges and provide some value. So I combine the one-on-ones with also kind of the group sessions. So for example, people who follow me on LinkedIn or the newsletter, I will say, hey, look, I'm running this session. We're going to be talking about A, B, and C. Feel free to join. And once again, that way I can meet, 30, 40 people at one time. They still get to interact with me. They still get to see, my expertise, and it allows me to kind of do it that way. So it really depends on your bandwidth nowadays. That both can be quite well. If you're really really time starved, you could focus on your high those who are the highest likelihood to convert, like your decision makers, would be someone you want to do one-on-ones with. Whereas the influencers or the internal champions could be a different bucket that you do like the group sessions with, depending on how many prospects you have and kind of what your time is available. So you could break it that way to go very deep into um, a target decision makers conversation. Because it's another thing I realized is that the decision makers, the higher you go, the more they like the one-on-one. They like the personal touch. Whereas the people at execution level, they're totally fine with group sessions. They like meeting different people. They like learning from others. So it's important to understand people's personal preferences as well. Some are extroverted and they like the group. Some prefer the one-on-ones. So just asking them, say, hey, look, we've been connected for a while. We haven't had a chance to catch up. Would love to find out more about you. I'm running a session, a group session later this month. Or if you feel more comfortable doing a one-on-one, let me know. Happy to do that. I think now is the time not to be selling. I mean, for me, I've never sold. It sounds crazy because the business I've built, me and my team have built, but I've never sold anything. I'm constantly thinking about how can I help educate, how can I help add value to anyone I interact with. And so I think now is the perfect time to do that because you're not going to sell, or you're not going to sell to the same volume that you would previously. So having that mentality is extremely important. So once you take that pressure off your shoulders and you say, look, I don't have to sell right now, or I don't have to sell as much, then you can say, okay, flip the switch. How do I help people now? How do I provide expertise? How do I provide tips or things that have worked for me? How can I share it with others, whether it's through content or through one-on-ones or group? That should be your main focus right now if you want to drive customers post COVID.
Yeah, they always say that it's important to add value more than sell, right? And that's I really resonate with that message because a lot of people are so desperate to sell, but they forget about what am I adding value to other people, and that's something that we all need to kind of step back and think about, especially during these times where, as you say, it's very hard to sell. Nobody has the wallets to spend an extra money to do other things that you want to do. So yeah, I really value your tips a lot, and I hope the whole the listeners really take a lot of it back, and then incorporate that into their businesses. So thank you very much for your time. I super enjoyed it. I believe that I need to ask you a lot more questions. Maybe we could do like a follow up again sometime
Yeah.
in the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked this show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.